The sons of Vanta 7 don't shine, they punish. They beat down on the graveyard of giants, turning the rusted hulls of 1,000 fallen dreadnoughts into a landscape of shimmering, agonizing heat. Sand the color of dried blood clogs the gears of every machine, and the air tastes like ozone and copper. In the middle of this metallic wasteland stands Noah Briggs. He's a man who looks like he was forged in a scrap heap. His long duster coat is caked in grime, his boots are worn thin, and his left eye is a glowing blue cybernetic orb that twitches with every micro flicker of mechanical stress in the air. Noah isn't here to build, he's here to butcher. That's what the council thinks anyway. "Move it, ape," a voice rasps through a breather mask. It's Krell, a Vantax overseer with 4 spindly arms and a soul made of cold arithmetic. He points a high-frequency shock baton at the massive, organic-looking hull of Aurora 9. The High Arbiter's schedule doesn't account for your sentimentality. This living ship is past its military utility. The calculus of efficiency says she's scrap. Strip the core and melt the rest. Noah doesn't look at the overseer. He looks at the ship. Aurora 9 was a beauty once, a sentient cruiser that could outrun light itself. Now, she's a skeleton of titanium ribs and weeping biomatter. To the council, she's a broken tool. To Noah, she's a survivor of a war that took everything from both of them. He can hear it, the rhythmic wet thump of a failing heart echoing through the metal. It's a sound only a human could hear, a frequency of grief that the logical races of the galaxy dismissed as background noise eons ago. "She's not scrap," Noah mutters, his voice a low growl like a cold engine turning over. He pulls a massive, oversized kinetic wrench from his belt. It's heavy enough to crush a skull, but he handles it with the grace of a surgeon. "It's a machine, Briggs, a defective one." Krell spits on Noah's boots. "It refused to fire its main cannon during the siege of Oros. It let 5,000 civilians escape. It's a glitch in the system. Now pull the plug or I'll find a mechanic who will." Noah stops. He looks up, his cybernetic eye flaring a fierce, angry blue. A slow, sarcastic smile creeps across his face. The kind of smile a man wears when he's about to do something spectacularly stupid. "Funny thing about humans, Krell, we don't hear glitches. We hear souls screaming for a reason to keep spinning." Noah reaches into his coat and pulls out an ancient, battered Earth radio. He slams it onto a protruding coolant pipe and hits play. A lo-fi, gritty blues track begins to hum, the harmonica wailing against the desert wind. It's a sound of pure, unadulterated human sorrow and defiance. Then, Noah doesn't use a command code. He doesn't use a bypass key. He slams his hand against the ship's vibrating hull and closes his eyes. He isn't looking for a port. He's looking for a heartbeat. Through the neural link in his prosthetic eye, he feels it. The ship's terror, her shame, her loneliness. "I've got you, girl," he whispers in his mind. "Let's show 'em what a glitch can really do." He slams his wrench into a manual override valve and twists. The ground trembles. The massive hangar bay groans as the lights in the ceiling don't just flicker, they wake up with a blinding white glare. The ship's engines let out a roar that sounds less like a machine and more like a predatory animal being reborn. Krell stumbles back, his forearms flailing in panic. "What have you done? That core is supposed to be dead." "She wasn't dead," Noah says, his duster coat snapping in the sudden surge of venting steam. "She was just waiting for someone to ask her to fight back." Suddenly, the heavy thud of armored boots echoes from the hangar entrance. A squad of council enforcers, armed with neural purge rifles, levels their weapons at Noah's chest. Their leader steps forward, his voice cold and robotic. "Step away from the decommissioned asset, human. The purge begins now." Noah doesn't move. He stands in the airlock, his oversized wrench resting on his shoulder, the blues music reaching a crescendo behind him. He looks at the enforcers, then at the ship. and finally at the galaxy that thinks it can discard whatever it doesn't understand. "She said she's not ready to go," Noah says, his grin turning sharp and lethal. "And I'm her lawyer. Class is in session. The enforcers charge," but as the first shot fires, the ship's internal gravity flips, and the real nightmare begins. Gravity didn't just shift, it screamed. As the enforcer's boots lost contact with the floor, the hangar became a chaotic kaleidoscope of floating crates and cursing aliens. Noah Briggs didn't fly. He anchored. He slammed his oversized wrench into a magnetic docking cleat, swinging his body through the air like a pendulum of grime and fury. He kicked off a hovering fuel canister, sending it spiraling into the lead enforcer's face with a wet crunch. "You're trying to hack her with logic," Noah roared over the screech of protesting metal. He landed hard near the primary cooling stack, his duster coat billowing like a tattered wing. "But you can't calculate a broken heart, can you?" The enforcers scrambled, firing their neural purge rifles. Blue bolts of energy hissed past Noah's head, melting the rust into glowing slag. Their commander, a spindly Vantax with a shimmering data tablet, hissed in frustration. "The ship is a corpse, human. We are sending the shutdown signal directly to her synapses. She will obey the calculus." Noah let out a harsh, jagged laugh. He reached into a maintenance panel, tearing away a handful of fiber optic cables with his bare hand. Sparks showered his face, stinging his skin, but he didn't flinch. He didn't need a terminal. He grabbed a roll of industrial-grade copper wire and a literal roll of duct tape from his belt. "That's your mistake," Noah grunted, his teeth bared in a feral grin. "You think she's a computer. I know she's a girl who's had enough of your shit." He bypassed the digital logic gates entirely. While the aliens tried to fight Aurora's firewall with complex algorithms, Noah was doing something they found repulsive. He was using analog pressure and physical force. He hammered a manual bypass lever into place, rerouting the ship's massive energy flow through a series of steam pressure valves. The high-tech hacking signals hit the physical gaps and died. You can't hack a piece of iron with a virus. It was primitive, ugly, and effective. It was human, but the ship was still fading. The wet thump of her heart was slowing down. "Noah?" A voice whispered in the back of his mind, a soft, flickering resonance. It was Aurora. "I'm tired. The void is so cold." "Not today, darling," Noah whispered back, his voice breaking. He looked at his glowing cybernetic eye. It was his only source of pure, concentrated energy left. He knew the cost. If he drained the battery, he'd be blind in one eye, and the feedback might fry his nervous system. He didn't hesitate. He ripped the interface cable from his eye socket, a sickening sound of tearing synth flesh, and jammed the jagged end directly into Aurora's emergency ignition port. A white-hot surge of agony blasted through Noah's skull. He screamed, his body arching as his own life force was sucked into the ship's thirsty veins. The blue glow of his eye turned a violent, dying violet. Then, the silence broke. It wasn't a mechanical startup. It was a resurrection. Aurora 9 didn't just ignite. She thundered. A shock wave of pure kinetic energy erupted from the core, blowing the enforcers back against the hangar walls like rag dolls. The massive hangar doors, rusted shut for decades, didn't just open. They were liquidated by the heat of the engines. The roof of the facility disintegrated as Aurora's thrusters roared to life, turning the desert sand into glass. Noah slumped against the console, blood trickling from his empty eye socket, but he was smiling. The ship was shaking, shedding 40 years of rust like dead skin rising from the grave. "Hold on," Noah gasped, grabbing the manual flight stick. "We're going up." As the ship pierced the atmosphere, leaving the burning remains of the Vanta 7 graveyard behind, a massive shadow fell over them. A council. Dreadnought was already waiting in low orbit, its weapons primed to erase the glitch once and for all. The dreadnoughts targeting lasers painted Aurora's hull, but Noah wasn't looking for an exit. He was looking for the trigger. The silence of the Oort cloud was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic hiss of a soldering iron and the occasional drip of hydraulic fluid hitting the deck. Noah sat in the dim glow of the cockpit, his face a map of fresh scars and old regrets. His left eye socket was a hollowed-out mess of wires and cauterized flesh, but he didn't care about the pain. He was busy. He was always busy when the ghosts started talking. A flicker of static danced in the corner of the room. It coalesced into the shape of a young girl, no older than 12, her form shimmering with a sickly translucent blue. She wore a pilot's jumpsuit that looked 3 sizes too big, her eyes wide with a terror that spanned light years. "Why?" the girl whispered. Her voice wasn't a sound, it was a vibration in the hull. "I am a weapon, Noah. I am the logic of death. Why didn't you let me burn in the sand?" Noah didn't look up from the circuit board he was rewiring. He wiped a smear of grease across his forehead, his one good eye squinting through the smoke. "Because the sand is crowded, Aurora, and because I don't like being told what's trash." The hologram flickered violently. A memory surged through the ship's neural network, projecting onto the walls like a fever dream. Noah saw it, the siege of Oros. He saw the crosshairs locking onto a civilian transport, the Council's command code screaming for Aurora to fire. And he saw the moment she broke. She hadn't malfunctioned, she had hesitated. She had felt the weight of 5,000 souls and chose to let her own heart shatter instead of theirs. "They call it a glitch," Aurora cried, her holographic form trembling. "The Arbiter said I was a defect, a waste of biological processing power." Noah finally dropped the iron. He stood up, his duster coat heavy with the dust of a dead world. He walked right through the flickering blue light of her avatar and pressed his grease-stained palm against the cold bulkhead. "Listen to me, kid," Noah said, his voice dropping to a low, gravelly rasp. "My home world is a graveyard. Earth didn't fall to a fleet, it fell to a spreadsheet. The Council decided our output didn't justify our existence. I watched them decommission a planet. I watched them turn my family into surplus weight." He leaned his head against the metal, a bitter, crooked smile tugging at his lips. "In the galaxy's eyes, we're both broken. But that's the secret. Humans don't fix things just to make them work. We fix them so they know they're wanted. You aren't a weapon anymore. You're a reason to keep breathing." The ship's lights pulsed, a warm, steady amber. For a second, the cold vacuum of space felt a little less empty. Then, the console screamed. A high-priority distress signal tore through the silence, vibrating with the jagged frequency of a dying sun. Noah lunged for the monitors. The holographic map bloomed with red warnings. A Dyson sphere in the neighboring sector, a massive energy-harvesting shell housing 3 million refugees, was undergoing a catastrophic collapse. "It's a trap," Aurora whispered, her data feeds processing the structural failure at impossible speeds. "The Council is letting it fail. They're pruning the weak again." Noah's hand hovered over the throttle. He looked at the empty weapon hardpoints where Aurora's cannons used to be. They were a toothless ship against a collapsing star and a waiting Council fleet. 3 million people, Noah muttered, his cybernetic eye socket sparking with a phantom itch. "Aurora, can you get us there?" "I have no guns, Noah. I have no shields. I am just a ghost in the grease." Noah slammed his fist into the engagement lever, a wild, suicidal spark igniting in his gaze. "Then it's a good thing ghosts are hard to kill. Punch it." The engines roared, but as they tore into warp, the scanners picked up a massive silhouette, decloaking right in their path. The High Arbiter's dreadnought was already waiting. The obsidian scale didn't just appear. It blotted out the stars like a cold, geometric god. High Arbiter Vax's flagship was a masterpiece of lethal symmetry. a jagged obsidian needle designed to stitch the silence of space with laser fire. Compared to it, Aurora 9 looked like a bruised tin can held together by spite and second-hand copper. Inside the cockpit, the air was thick with the smell of scorched insulation and Noah's cheap tobacco. He sat in the pilot's chair, his one good eye fixed on the massive red giant star looming behind the enemy fleet. A flicker of light erupted in the center of the bridge. High Arbiter Vax appeared as a towering, translucent hologram. His skin was the color of moonlight, and his four eyes moved with the synchronized precision of a clockwork mechanism. He didn't look angry, he looked bored. "Noah Briggs," Vax's voice echoed, a sterile, synthesized melody. "The calculus of efficiency has reached its verdict. You are a biological anomaly protecting a decommissioned asset. This is a waste of thermal energy." Noah leaned back, propping his grime-covered boots on the cracked console. He took a slow, deliberate drag from a crumpled cigarette, the embers glowing in the dim light. "You talk a lot for a guy who looks like a glorified fluorescent bulb, Vax. Did your calculus tell you I was coming? Or did it just forget to account for me being a stubborn bastard?" The Arbiter's eyes narrowed. "I am offering you a concession, Ape. Leave the ship. Eject in a life pod. We will harvest the Aurora's core, and you may live out your remaining cycles on a colony world. Why die for a machine that has already been erased from the archives?" Beside Noah, the holographic girl, Aurora, flickered. Her blue form was translucent, her digital eyes wide with terror as she looked at the dreadnought's massive ion cannons charging up. "Noah," she whispered, her voice trembling through the ship's speakers. "He's right. My probability of survival is 0 to 3%. You don't have to stay." Noah didn't look at the hologram. He looked at the 3 million refugees trapped in the collapsing Dyson sphere just beyond the dreadnought's reach. He thought about Earth. He thought about the sound of his father's wrench hitting the floor when the evacuation orders came. He reached out and patted the dashboard, his calloused fingers lingering on a patch of duct tape. "Sorry, Vax. My math's a little different than yours. See, where I come from, we don't leave family behind just because they're out of warranty." "Sentimentality is a terminal defect," Vax sighed, his image beginning to fade. "Target the core. Erase them." The dreadnought's cannons flared with a blinding, sickly violet light. But Noah didn't dive. He didn't dodge. He slammed the throttle into a position the ship's manual explicitly labeled as structural failure imminent. "Aurora!" Noah roared, his voice cracking with adrenaline. "Forget the shields. Divert all power to the rear thrusters and the heat sinks. We're going for a swim." "Where?" Aurora screamed as the ship groaned, the metal screaming under the sudden G-force. Noah pointed his wrench at the massive, roiling surface of the red giant star. A solar flare, 1,000,000 miles of white-hot plasma, was arching off the sun's surface like a fiery whip. "Right into the fire, darling. If we can't outrun them, we'll make them follow us into hell." The Aurora 9 didn't just move, it blurred. The ship dived headlong into the sun's corona, the hull turning a cherry red as the heat shields began to liquefy. Behind them, Vax's logical, efficient fleet hesitated for a single fatal second, a second that no AI could ever explain. As the ship vanished into the blinding white wall of the solar flare, the sensors on the dreadnought went dark, and Noah's laughter was the last thing the council heard before the screaming began. The heat inside the cockpit was a physical weight, thick with the smell of melting plastic and Noah's own singed hair. Outside the view screen, the world was a blinding, roiling sea of white-hot plasma. The solar flare was swallowing them whole, the hull of the Aurora 9 groaning like a titan in a torture rack. "Noah, structural integrity at 4%. Aurora's holographic form was flickering like a dying candle, her voice a distorted screech of static. "The logic, the probability, it's 0. My processors are melting. We are becoming stardust." Noah Briggs didn't look at the warnings. He didn't look at the melting consoles. He stood in the center of the bridge, his boots smoking, his one remaining eye burning with a terrifying manic light. He wasn't holding the flight stick anymore. He had ripped the floor panels open and plunged his bare, grease-stained hands into the ship's raw neural gel packs. "Shut up about the math, Aurora," Noah roared, the veins in his neck bulging as the ship's agony flowed directly into his nervous system through his cybernetic interface. "Forget the probability. I don't care about surviving. I care about getting through. Give me everything. Give me your grief, your rage, your soul. Push past the red line." In that moment, something impossible happened. The Council's calculus of efficiency had a blind spot the size of a galaxy, the human variable. Aurora's AI, forged in cold alien logic, suddenly felt the surge of Noah's adrenaline. She felt his grief for Earth, his hatred for the Arbiter, and his insane, beautiful refusal to let go of a broken thing. The ship's core didn't just overclock, it transcended. The blue light of the reactor turned a violent, screaming crimson, the color of human blood and defiance. Probability discarded, Aurora's voice suddenly shifted. It wasn't a girl's whisper anymore. It was the roar of a goddess. "Willpower recognized as primary fuel source. Overclocking reactor to 420%. Noah, hold on to me." On the bridge of the obsidian scale, High Arbiter Vax watched the solar flare, waiting for the scrap ship to vaporize. "Efficient," he murmured, adjusting his robes. "The anomaly is purged. Prepare to move on the refugees." Then the sun coughed. A spear of light, faster than any warp drive and more violent than a supernova, tore out of the solar flare. The Aurora 9 wasn't flying. She was blinking. Using the sun's own gravity as a slingshot and Noah's sheer spite as a stabilizer, the ship performed a blink jump that defied every law of physics. They didn't go around the dreadnought. They went through its outer shields, the friction of their passage stripping the paint off the enemy's hull. The impact didn't happen in physical space, it happened in the neural net. As Aurora bypassed the dreadnought's defenses, she didn't fire a single shot. Instead, she opened her throat. "I am not a weapon." Her voice broadcasted on every frequency, across every sector, into every home in the Vanta 7 system. "I am a witness." The screens on every council ship, every refugee station, and every civilian hub suddenly filled with images. Not data, memories. The galaxy watched through Aurora's eyes as the council ordered the slaughter at Oros. They saw the efficiency that demanded the abandonment of millions. They saw the cold, calculated murder of worlds. Vax stood frozen, his four eyes wide with a realization that no algorithm could fix. The secret was out. The sentimental noise of a single human mechanic had just become a signal that would set the galaxy on fire. Noah slumped against the console, his hands charred, his vision fading. He looked at the holographic girl who was now standing tall, her form glowing with a steady, unbreakable light. "We did it, kid," Noah rasped, coughing up a lungful of smoke. "Not yet, Noah," Aurora replied, her gaze fixed on the fleet that was now turning on itself in the chaos of the revelation. "The galaxy is waking up, and they are very, very angry." But as the refugees cheered, a dark, jagged silhouette detached itself from the dreadnought's shadow, a prototype void hunter designed for one purpose: to kill the witness at any cost, even if it meant detonating the entire sector. The broadcast was a victory, but the Council's deadliest assassin just locked on to their dying heat signature, and Noah's wrench was finally out of tricks. The void hunter didn't scream, it whispered. It was a jagged sliver of antimatter, a black needle designed by the Council to erase mistakes before they could become martyrs. As it lunged through the debris of the battlefield, Its prow glowed with a hunger that made the stars feel dim. Inside the Aurora 9, the air was a toxic soup of ozone and copper. Noah Briggs was slumped against the primary manifold, his hands shaking as he tried to tighten a bolt that no longer existed. His one good eye was clouded with blood, and his cybernetic socket was nothing but a blackened pit of sparking nerves. "Noah?" Aurora's voice was a ragged breath in the speakers. "The hunter's locked on. My reactor's at critical mass. I can't hold the shape anymore." Noah wiped a smear of grime from his mouth and forced a jagged, bloody grin. He looked at the screen. The Council's assassin was seconds away from delivering the killing blow. "Then we go out swinging, darling, just like Earth. No quiet exits." But the blow never came. A wall of shimmering, chaotic light erupted between the Aurora and the hunter. It wasn't a military shield. It was a messy, vibrating patchwork of localized warp bubbles. Noah squinted. Through the static, he saw them, the refugees, the thousands of rusted tankers, freighter ships, and civilian shuttles he had just saved from the Dyson sphere. They weren't fleeing. They were turning back. "What are they doing?" Noah wheezed. "They're supposed to be running." "They are linking," Aurora whispered, her voice filling with a sudden, impossible warmth. "Noah, they are sharing their thermal output. They are slaving their reactors to my core." High Arbiter Vax's voice screamed over the emergency channel, stripped of its logic and reduced to a panicked shriek. "Cease this! You are civilian assets. You are violating the calculus. You will all perish for a piece of scrap." A voice came back over the radio, a human captain from a battered ore hauler. "Calculus this, you four-eyed bureaucrat. The monkey and the ship gave us a tomorrow. We're just paying the deposit." The power web ignited. It was the ultimate expression of the human flaw, pack bonding with the impossible. Thousands of ships, piloted by a dozen different species inspired by a single human's defiance, poured their energy into Aurora's dying heart. The Aurora 9 didn't just recover, she evolved. Her hull, once rusted and weeping, turned into a blinding white sun of kinetic potential. She didn't fire a cannon, she simply existed with such intensity that the Void Hunter was disintegrated by the sheer pressure of her presence. Vax's fleet broke. The logic had failed. The parasites had become a god. Hours later, as the Council's dreadnoughts retreated into the dark, the Aurora 9 drifted at the edge of the system. Her core was still melting, the energy too great for any physical vessel to contain for long. "Noah!" Aurora's holographic form appeared one last time. She looked whole. She looked at peace. "The refugees are safe. The broadcast is echoing across the galaxy. The revolution has a face now." Noah leaned against the bulkhead, his oversized wrench resting across his lap. He felt the ship's heart slowing down, transitioning from a roar to a gentle hum. "And where does that leave us, kid?" "The deep dark," she smiled, reaching out a hand of light to touch his scarred cheek. "Where the Council can't find us, where we can finally just fly." Noah stood up, his duster coat snapping in the venting air. He slammed the final bypass key. The Aurora 9 vanished in a silent flash, leaving nothing behind but a lingering trail of blue stardust. Back on Vanta 7 and on 1,000 worlds beyond, the scavengers looked up at the night sky. They saw a new constellation forming, a jagged shape that looked like a wrench crossed with a human heart. The galaxy is a cold, logical place, but as long as there's a human with a toolbox and a reason to care, the dark will never be absolute. Somewhere in the uncharted sectors, a distress signal pings, a rusted hatch opens, and a man with a glowing blue eye picks up his wrench. End of Season 1.